Did I make the right choice going to a regional when I got furloughed from the major? Well, we're going to answer that question in this podcast right now. Hi, my name is Carl Valeri, and I've been an aviation career coach since 2001. And this is a question that I get quite often. If you have questions, by the way, feedback at aviationcareerspodcast.com, or you can just comment down below. So one of the things, let me just read his questions right out here. And by the way, if you do have a question, I don't read your name unless you really want me to, but I try to, make sure that your privacy is really, really important to us, so we make sure that it's anonymous. He writes in and says, just stumbled across your videos, good stuff. Curious on your thoughts. I'm an interesting case. I went directly to a low-cost carrier after instructing, had 2 years of little flying, and then furloughed. After 9 months furloughed, managed to get on with a regional. I have a young family, so I wasn't too keen on cargo as an option, yet didn't quite have the resume for a mainline. Was a regional the right choice? Strange times, he says after that. Well, absolutely was the right choice for you. And we're going to dive into that in this video and just kind of really flesh out everything as part of that type of decision-making process, which is really important. First of all, know this, and you talked about a unique situation. You're not alone. Amazingly enough, this happens quite often throughout the cycles of the industry. After 9/11, it happened. 2008, it happened, etc. So a lot of other people have done the same. And if you just look at it on the internet and ask questions, you might get a response. You probably won't, because some people are a little bit embarrassed by the fact that they had to go to the regionals. So that brings me to our next point, which is don't let your ego get in the way of your career. Your ego is telling you, hey, I'm a mainline pilot. I'm flying an Airbus 320 or a 737, and I don't want to go back to the regionals. Well, remember, our egos can really get in the way of what we're doing in our life and our career. As a matter of fact, that brings up another point. Our book of the month, actually, this month is Ego is the Enemy, right? Ego is the Enemy is the name of the book for the Book of the Month Club. You can find that just going on our book reading list on the side of the page there, and the Book of the Month. So recommended reading, press on recommended reading. You can find it there. I always have a Book of the Month Club. It's usually more so about, something to help you in your career. So go check that out. It describes how ego can really get in the way of our career in general, and just in our life, not just our career, but our life. So what do I mean by that? Sometimes we have to take a step backwards and then take 2 steps forward. A lot of times our ego gets in the way, telling us that, hey, listen, I'm a mainline pilot. I shouldn't have to go back to the regionals, etc. I'll give you a really clear example of this. After 9/11, mainline pilots flew back at the regionals. Many of them flew back to the regionals. They had these things called flow-throughs and things like that, and you're kind of like these cadet programs, but a little bit different, where they could actually take the jobs of regional pilots based on their seniority. And that's what happened. A lot of these airline pilots flowed back to the regionals. They were thankful to have a job. Of course, many of them complained they had to fly a regional. One good thing for some of the regional pilots is some did have those egos, and they said they'll never fly a regional jet again, so they didn't go backwards. But here's a great example of how ego got in the way of a lot of people that were trying to keep jobs, but they didn't want to fly anything but a regional jet. So after 9/11, I became the furlough rep for ALPA for Continental Express, and I also helped out a lot of people throughout the Airline Pilots Association throughout the world. And one of the things that I found is working with this one specific regional, we had an agreement with this regional, and it was kind of like a jet for job, but instead of jets, it was a turboprop. Well, what happened? Well, they had these turboprops that they were flying, and said, hey, listen, we need pilots because we're now flying for Continental. We don't have enough pilots. We're going to take all of your furloughed pilots and have them interview and actually bring on most of them. So what happened is those pilots went over to this regional airline, but a lot of times when the interview came about, they wouldn't show up. And why didn't they show up for that interview? Because they were flying a jet, and this was a turboprop. They're a jet pilot now. They don't fly a turboprop anymore. Many of these people had less than 1,000 hours. Many of them were hired with 500 hours. And now they're flying a jet, and now they're a jet pilot, but they can't get beyond the fact that they need to build hours to move on to the majors. And it's basically you're looking at a gift horse in the mouth. So what happened was is that the regional airline I was working with, they said, hey, listen, send all your pilots over for interviews. Just send them in a batch because we know they're going to say no, so we can start hiring from the street. It's kind of like these cadet programs where at the end of when they get hired at the end of the process, they say, oh, no, I don't want to sign a contract or whatever it may be. All of a sudden now they have to go to the street and hire people. Very similar there. So that's what happened. A lot of people declined jobs. And then this played out very interestingly. About 6 months later, the mainline carriers furloughed again. This is after 9/11. And now all those pilots started calling me saying, hey, listen, can we have those jobs now at that regional carrier? The regional carrier said, no, you've already turned us down. We have other pilots that want to fly here. So again, don't let ego get in the way. So let's switch to a more positive example, okay? For a while, same thing, I was furloughed, and this jet regional airline, largest regional airline in the United States, you probably know who I'm talking about, they actually hired me on to be a first officer. And when I was in class at that regional, it amazed me how many people were actually mainline pilots. 80% of my class, the last thing they flew was a major airline, like 737, 757, 767s, and Airbus aircraft. Now, why were they flying for this regional airline? Because of this. They knew that the best thing for them to do is to stay current. I heard that often. Stay current and be relevant in the industry because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, it's great to be furloughed and be on the list over at a major, but what if that major goes out of business, right? You're on the list, but that list may be meaningless. So they said, I'm going to make myself qualified for the next job. What this does is keep them current. And we're talking back in 2001, 2002, 2003. And these people knew that. And they were ahead of the game either when their airline went bankrupt, they actually got jobs somewhere else because they were current and flying. Very important thing. So that is important too, is to keep current and keep flying. They knew this. I was really humbled. It was incredible to be in this class where I think I only had about 200 hours of multi-engine time, and these people had like 8,000 hours, a lot of these folks. Pretty interesting. So again, there's a good example of these people doing the right thing, just trying to reinforce the fact that you made the right decision to go to a regional, even though you were furloughed from a mainline carrier. Just remember also, you are gaining valuable hours towards your career goal. And this is just a stepping stone. Just like maybe that low-cost carrier you were working for wasn't really your career goal. Maybe it was, but at least now you're building hours to move on to the next step. We're all in that precarious position. Until you have maybe 5,000, 10,000 hours, you need to keep thinking about what the next step is. Around 10,000 hours, you can get pretty fairly comfortable. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of competition out there for certain jobs, and there are a lot of applicants that actually have 10,000 hours for some of these jobs. But at that point, maybe you can kind of ease off a little bit, maybe get some other ratings, etc. But keep on building hours. Look at the marketplace. If you see in the marketplace people at the majors, like right now, getting hired between 5,000 to 10,000 hours, that's what you need to shoot for your goal. And don't stop. Don't stop flying until you get that number of hours. Not only that, don't stop flying until you get the job at the major. Now, you talked about cargo and doing those other things. Just remember, you're flying for a 121 carrier in the system, right? And that's putting you way ahead of many of your peers that have decided that they don't want to do that. They want to stay home, maybe fly, I don't know, something locally. And we're not faulting them for that. Maybe they're flying to Pilatus, and that Pilatus is right next to their home. You got to do what's best for your family. But what you're doing is building valuable 121 time. Please do this also. Look at your personal situation. Don't listen to others. Look at your own personal situation and do what's best for you. Do what's best for you and your career. Also, what's really important, do what's best for you and your family. What you did was the best thing for your family. And having a happy life is a big part of this. it's not just the job. I mean, you can chase the big airplane, but when you get to that airplane, you may realize that you don't like the job. Airplane's great, but the job's not so good. You're based in Anchorage, Alaska, but you live in Miami, Florida, and that's a heck of a commute. Well, maybe you could find an airline that works out of Miami, Florida, or vice versa if you want to be up in Anchorage. Or say that if you actually want to fly a certain airplane and you can't get there yet, you may have to actually take something else, but keep doing what's best for you and your family. And that means being close and making money. You're in the field of aviation, you're building hours, and that's what's really important. So if you're trying to determine if you made the right decision, first thing I want you to do is consult with your family, your spouse, even your kids, and they can have input too. It doesn't matter how small they are. Not as much, but of course, a little bit of input's always good from everybody. Find out a mentor. Find a mentor in your family, your friends. You can also go out and find somebody like myself. We do mentorship here. We do career coaching one-on-one. And discuss with the people within that group or within that one-on-one coaching session whether this is the best thing to do for you. And that's really, really important, because when you put those questions out on the internet, the first thing that a person's going to tell you is you're crazy or whatever. You get some really crazy responses. But you want to be in a group of people. You want to be in a group of people that have your best interests in mind. And a lot of times that is that one-on-one coaching, that mentorship through friends, relatives, or a career coach, kind of like we do here at Aviation Careers Podcast. But the most important thing you do for me is this, and you're doing it, is continually taking one step every day towards your career goal. And by being in that 121, by building those hours in the system, you're taking that step. And if you're somebody who is maybe not in the same situation, but you're thinking this could happen to me, just remember this, that every day you should take one step towards your career goal, and don't stop trying to learn more, build more hours, and get more ratings. And you know what? You're going to get to that career goal, whatever it may be, sooner than you think. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. Again, did you make the right decision going to a regional after you got furloughed at a major? I think you did. I'd love to hear your comments below. Questions, go ahead, feedback at aviationcareerspodcast.com. But again, most importantly, take one step today to move forward in your career, in your life. Take care now. Safe flying out there.